Appreciate it. We're going to now turn to election results. We're going to speed things up a bit because obviously we took some time to listen to the president. So let me just check in now. And we've been talking about last night's big primary. Results are still being tabulated in some key races in certainly California. But there are also some definitive answers, and we'll get to the outstanding contest in a moment. But let's talk about the notable races that have been called. Now, in Iowa, businessman Zach Lund defeated the Trump-backed candidate, Congressman Randy Feenstra, in the Republican primary for governor. And the president had endorsed Feenstra in the final days of the campaign. And this is really notable in the sense that it is the first primary defeat of a Trump-backed candidate this year. And we've seen the president have a long stretch of successes in the primary season. This is one of those where it did not go his way. Lund, who was supported by HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy's MAHA movement, portrayed himself as a political outsider in his victory speech.
I don't have to tell you this, but nobody thought this could be done. We were outspent, opposed by the establishment, told to wait our turn. Well, tonight the people of Iowa had something to say about that we're not going to wait anymore.
Lund will face Democrat Rob Sand, who ran unopposed in the general election. Meanwhile, Democrats' hopes of flipping Iowa's open Senate seat will rest with State Representative Josh Turek, a moderate and a former para-Olympian who defeated progressive State Senator Zach Walz.
My whole life. And this is what is needed in D.C. People who have gone through real struggle, who know what it's like to not have enough, who know what a gallon of gas costs, who have had to put groceries on a credit card. We have enough millionaires in D.C. looking out for billionaires. We need real people in Washington who have felt the consequences of a broken system, because when you have gone through real struggle, you will have a different level of empathy and a different level of fight.
A taste of the messaging from primary night. Turek will face Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, who was endorsed by President Trump in the general election. That is the seat to replace Joni Ernst. In California, the race for governor remains too early to call. There are three main candidates: former HHS Secretary Javier Becerra under the Biden administration, billionaire activist Tom Steyer, and conservative commentator Steve Hilton. They're all competing for two spots in the general election race through to November, regardless of party there. And in the race for Los Angeles mayor, incumbent Karen Bass will move on to the November election, although it is still not clear if she will face Democratic City Council member Nithya Raman or Republican reality TV star. Do we say star? It was a long time ago. Spencer Pratt. He certainly made a big impact in this race. And joining us now to talk about it, NBC News chief data analyst Steve Kornacki. He joins me from his home away from home. That's the big board. And also with me is Conan Nolan, political reporter for our Los Angeles station, KNBC, and a good pal of mine from the old days when I was based in L.A. So good to see you both. Steve, your biggest takeaways. You had a little time maybe to catch your breath, have a cup of coffee, get a little rest. Where do you think things stand right now in California?
Yeah, well, let's take a look out there, because I mean, I think we all kind of expected it might end up being a cliffhanger in California. But here in the governor's race, really, I see Becerra is in second place here. But you have to remember that the way these things go in California is what's to come are the late arriving vote by mail ballots. And there are a ton of them. There's, just over half the vote counted here. And we know that those votes skew a lot more Democratic than what's been counted so far. So the key here is that between the two Democratic candidates, Becerra and Steyer, Becerra has been pretty significantly outpacing Steyer. Then you add into that, again, the expectation that the remaining vote is going to be much more Democratic than what we've seen. And Becerra is sitting in a pretty good shape. If you're him, you're very happy with where you are right now. And certainly the possibility that he would leapfrog Steve Hilton here into first place as those votes are tabulated. The suspense then would become, if Becerra does indeed leapfrog Hilton, is that gap between Steyer and Hilton, is that remaining vote by mail so strongly and overwhelmingly Democratic that it doesn't just lift Becerra, because Becerra is not far behind Hilton. Could it actually lift Steyer over Hilton, too? And you have a situation where Becerra and Steyer, the two Democrats, finish 1-2, lock out the Republican from the general election. That's really the remaining suspense here. I will say, when you look at these numbers, again, Steyer running there 400,000 votes by now. That's an awfully, awfully steep hill for Steyer to climb if he's going to leapfrog Hilton here. But again, you have that reality in California that late arriving vote by mail comes in very slowly and does tend to be overwhelmingly Democratic. So if it was extremely Democratic, that still could come into play.
And if I can tap into your thoughts on Iowa, when you think of what is the message going forward, is it that the president had a bit of a loss, a narrow loss in the primary, or is it that this is an open seat and it could be one of the most watched for Democrats' chances to perhaps try and get in there, or is it really about defending this terrain for Republicans? What's your sense of what Iowa means?
Well, the governor's race, that Republican primary is really interesting because it is a loss for Trump in that he endorsed Feenstra. But I think there might be a little bit of nuance here because we talk about the power of the Trump endorsement. And one question this raises is that Trump endorsement more impactful in a Republican primary when he's endorsing against somebody? Right? When he's saying, like in Kentucky, Republicans, I want Massey out. Massey's a problem. Tom Massey, the congressman who was defeated in the primary there. Here, Trump came in and endorsed Feenstra, but his opponent who defeated Feenstra aligned himself very strongly with Trump, with the MAGA grassroots, with that sort of populist brand of conservatism here. So, Trump wasn't coming in here telling voters, you've got to stay away from him. You've got to go with Feenstra. So did the endorsement was the endorsement not as impactful because of that? And then there's this, Kelly. I just would quickly point out, look at this margin. It was 1,600 votes. Trump made the endorsement of Feenstra last Friday. There had already been tens of thousands of early votes cast when Trump made that endorsement. A margin that thin. Did Trump just make the endorsement too late?
So interesting. So interesting. You are the guardian of the numbers, and you always teach us something. Thank you, Steve. Let me turn now to Conan. You have been as plugged in as anyone I know on politics in your home state, and you've even moderated some of the debates. You really are on the front lines of all of this. So when you look at what's happening there, what is the big story coming out of this when it comes to these two key races, the governor and the L.A. mayor?
Well, keep in mind that this is a very blue state. Javier Becerra's campaign was popping champagne corks last night. Not that, again, there is some drama as to who will be in the top two, but it appears that he has drawn Steve Hilton. And Kelly, remember, it was like 7 months ago we had a special election in California, Proposition 50, redrawing the congressional districts to favor Democrats. That wasn't going anywhere until Gavin Newsom said, hey, if you want to send a message to Donald Trump, then vote yes. And it passed with 64% of the vote. So you're going to need millions of Californians to change their mind about Donald Trump in November for a Republican to win statewide. In the race for mayor of Los Angeles, again, Spencer Pratt, he's a remarkable figure. He's sort of now a national spokesperson for the Republican Party when it comes to urban affairs run by Democrats. But I think he has a ceiling because Karen Bass showed that regardless of all the problems the city is facing and the catastrophic fires in the Palisades, she still is able to bring in a coalition effort. The more leftist, I should say, social democrat, Nithya Raman, did far more poorly than we expected, frankly. A very blue city. Spencer Pratt says he's ready for the fight, but this is going to be a very difficult task for him to get past the percentage that he already has in this primary.
Well, he has certainly emerged as an interesting figure in this election season. And Conan, I know you'll be watching all of it. We will check back with you in the weeks to come.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.